it's Josh, your fave mental health enthusiast, and welcome back to Jazz's Corner, where we discuss all things related to mental wellness. And in today's video, we're just going to have an honest conversation about reflecting on the past. To some degree, it's something that we all do, so there's no reason to be ashamed. But in this video, I want to talk about some of the benefits of reflecting on the past, as well as the sucky parts of reflecting on the past, because there's definitely some sucky parts. And I want to finish it off by discussing some key ways to reflect on the past. So if you are interested in hearing what I have to say on the matter, then stay tuned and cue the intro. There are 3 different benefits to reflecting on the past that I would like to speak about. The first one being that it can form as a serve of self-evaluation. So self-evaluation is something that I mentioned in my video on comparing yourself to others. Check it out if you haven't already. And when we are engaging in self-evaluation, when reflecting on our past, it can serve as a way for us to see maybe how much we have grown as a person or the ways in which we have flourished as a person. So using myself as an example, I will say that I haven't always been the strongest communicator. In the past, I felt very fearful of sharing my thoughts and feelings and emotions with others because I wasn't sure how they would be received. So I would bottle it all up, and then in moments where I really felt like I couldn't take it anymore, I would potentially explode or project those emotions onto other people. And that is not okay. And I'm mainly speaking from like middle to late adolescence. I at no point do these things now, but I'm able to reflect on the past and say, hey, there were probably ways in which you could have communicated and potentially avoided a big blowout type situation. And a large part of the reason why I reacted in that way during that period of my life was because I was very, very afraid of confrontation. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I didn't want to disturb the peace. And so I felt, if I just, stay quiet and don't say anything and just kind of tiptoe around the issue, then it'll be okay, right? No, it was never okay. Like literally never. Situations in which I avoided conflict always ended one of 2 ways. Either the other person walked away and that was the end of the connection, or I walked away and that was the end of the connection. And from those experiences, I learned that conflict cannot be avoided. It can only be prolonged. And why prolong it if you can just deal with it? If you can just embrace that moment and say, hey, I'm going to honor how I'm feeling about a particular situation, and even though the other person might not like it, I am within my rights to at least bring it up and we can have a discussion about it. And so that is the mindset that I've been going forward with in adulthood, where I am no longer fearful of confrontation. I am no longer fearful of feeling anger or disappointment or hurt. I am able to express my emotions in a way that resonate with me, but that aren't coming off as attacking other individuals. And we're able to sit down and have dialogues about what the issue at hand is, where did things go astray, and if possible, how can we remedy these things. And as I have continued to go through life and grow and nurture the connections that are in my life, I have realized that hard conversations do not always result in the death of a connection. Sometimes the hard conversations are coming from a place of love, and it might not be what you want to hear, but in the words of a really good friend of mine, it might be what you need to hear. And I really keep that in mind, because when you really have so much love for someone and you feel like, y'all aren't in a place where you can make it, where the connection can continue to thrive and succeed, it might be very tempting to call it quits and walk away, which is exactly what happened to me a lot in my adolescence. It's like friends would get fed up. We wouldn't have those difficult conversations, and so they would exit stage left. But I have learned that in my adult life, it's okay to have those difficult conversations as long as they are coming from a place of love, and I never take any of those conversations lightly. And that is one way that I have been able to reflect on my past in a way that best serves me and lets me know how far I've come as an individual and how much more growing I have to do, because it's definitely not a perfect process. Side note, if someone's being toxic, then that's not coming from a place of love, and you don't have to put up with that, and you don't even have to engage with that person if you would like. I am talking about healthy connections only. Also, the past can allow us to see where we are in the healing process with traumas that we might have experienced in life. So, for example, let's say, I don't want to get into anything too deep or specific, but you have had some sort of toxic connection in your life, and you finally put your foot down and you are no longer involved in that toxic connection or situation. You don't just wake up the next day like, oh, I'm healed, I am delivered, like that never happened, I am good. Like, that is not the way that life works. So as time goes on, you'll be able to reflect maybe on some of the memories, and maybe they hurt a little bit less. Maybe you have some triggers related to that connection, and you find that you're a little less triggered. So when healing from trauma, it's a slow and gradual process, but as you continue to reflect on the past, you'll be able to gauge where you are in the healing process by doing so. The second benefit that I would like to speak about in regard to reflecting on the past is that it can provide some perspective, because when we are too close to a situation, then we are unable to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. With the passage of time, we might start considering some things that we didn't previously consider before. And a classic example that I would like to give of gaining perspective is when we are children, because at some point we were all children and we saw what the adults in our lives went through, but it is a fact that developmentally children don't have the capacity to think about anybody but themselves. Like, they are egocentric in that it's all about them and them and them only. And so as a child, we might give the adults around us a hard time, but as we grow up and experience various situations, we might begin to develop understanding and empathy. And I am by no means normalizing toxic living situations or toxic adults in our lives, because those definitely exist. I'm talking about like run-of-the-mill type things where you got mad at your mom for taking your phone away for 2 days, and then you're like looking back on that 10 years later and you're like, Yeah, I was kind of being a butthole that day. I probably would have took my phone too. I'll give a very specific example with like me and my family members. So there was one time where I had a heart-to-heart with my mom. It was shortly after I got a kitten. And my kitten, I was very unused to having a kitten. So I just remember calling my mom and I said, I understand now. I understand why sometimes you needed a bit of time in your room where I was not there. And my mom was like, oh, you do now. You understand, huh? She was like, what prompted that? And I was like, my cat's been crying for about 30 minutes, so I'm sitting outside in my car because I'm scared to go in my house. Yeah, having kids will do that to you. You're right, Mom. Also, just to let y'all know, there was nothing wrong with my cat. She was not crying because anything was wrong. She was just crying because she wanted attention. She was a kitten. She was 4 months. And I had just gotten home. So I decided to sit in my car to compose myself because I knew as soon as I came in the house, it was going to be play and cuddle time. So, yeah. So all of that to say that given some time, you are likely to develop several various perspectives of a situation that has occurred in the past. And I always make sure to validate that very initial feeling that I have about a situation, because I don't want to distance myself from the situation to the point where I don't understand why I felt the way I felt in the first place, because I think that those initial feelings are very important. But if there is some room for a different perspective later on down the line, then, I will also keep that in consideration. So for example, there have been some connections in my own life that have ended, and at the time I was just like so hurt and distraught and I didn't understand. And now being like a few years removed from all of these various situations, I understand to the degree that I will be able to understand, because for some situations you may never know the full extent of why something happened the way that it happened. The third benefit that I would like to speak about is that reflecting on the past can actually help us navigate our futures, because once we go through things, it really has the ability to shift who we are as people, and there's definitely lessons to be learned in a lot of cases. And so if we examine a prior situation from the past, then in some ways it can serve as a cheat code for how to not have that same outcome in the future. And this is not 100% bulletproof per se. There's, going back to my video on boundaries where I spoke about being too rigid, if you model every single situation going forward based on something that happened in the past, so I'll give like a hypothetical situation. Let's say I really like this person, so I brought them some cookies. And they threw the cookies down. They didn't like the cookies. They like stomped on the cookies. They didn't appreciate the time that I put into making these cookies. That really hurt me. And so going forward, I'm like, I'm never gonna make cookies ever again. There will be no cookies to be made ever. This is a cookieless household because I cannot be bothered. And so there might be somebody that I really want to make cookies for, but because of that previous situation, I'm like, no, I can't make cookies for them. They're just gonna stomp on it. They're gonna stomp on my heart. I mean cookies, like the last person. And then I don't make them cookies, and now I'm still stuck living this cookieless life. Like, you feel what I'm saying? Like, you feel what I'm saying without having to say it? You can't treat everybody like that one person who stomped on your heart. I mean cookies. At best, navigating the past helps us to maybe recognize some signs and symptoms of someone who is not deserving of your heart. I didn't want to say cookies because I feel like that has another connotation. So, is deserving of your heart. So, maybe you baked these cookies for them, aka gave them your love and your time and affection, but like they didn't really have time for you. They didn't really express affection for you. Reflecting on that, you might be able to better identify those same attributes in another person. And then you'll be like, okay, no, they are not like even deserving of my time or my energy or my cookie dough, because cookies are expensive. It's an inflation out here. It's like, no, I can't do it. So yeah, we don't have like a cookie cutter model. Haha, get it? Cookie cutter model. We don't have one of those, but it can definitely help to inform how you move forward and progress in life. Now for the sucky parts of reflecting on the past. Number one being that it's very likely that you will miss people in situations that no longer serve you. And I feel you. I feel like we've all been there and done that at least some point post breakup, whether that was the breakup of a romantic connection or a platonic connection with a friend. And what I have to say about that is, even though you are reflecting on this connection and what it used to be, there is ultimately a reason why that individual is no longer in your life. I would really like to challenge you to not romanticize past platonic and romantic connections, mainly just because we as individuals are always growing and evolving, and yes, we can always appreciate the connection for what it was at that time, but if you consistently find yourself wanting to go back, like, oh, I wish I could go back, I wish I still had them in my life, like I said, there's most likely a reason why they are no longer in your life. And I'm not saying that you can't like work things out with people, but I would say to be cautious about longing for the past and just wanting to go back to the past and not embracing the future, because you're so focused on someone who's no longer in your life that you're passing up all of these other people who are trying to be in your life, whether it's a friend or a romantic partner or even a pet. I don't know, a pet. Another sucky part of reflecting on the past is negative feelings, because nobody wants to re-experience those feelings that they felt when the situation first happened, especially if a situation is fresh. Maybe it happened in the last year or so. If you are reflecting on the past, it might be a little bit too soon, and you might be exposing any internal wounds that you have before they're ready to be exposed, if that makes sense. It's like you gotta give yourself some time to start that healing process. And if you are consistently thinking about something that happened in the past, then it's likely that you are engaging in what's called rumination, which is when you are fixated on a certain thought or a certain person and you can't seem to get past it. So there are healthy ways to reflect on the past and, the lessons that you learned, or maybe some of the takeaways, or, how you've grown as a person, some of the benefits that I spoke about earlier. There's definitely a deep, dark side of reflecting on the past, and that can be detrimental to our mental health. And a lot of the time, we don't even realize that we're ruminating. It's only after someone else has brought it to our attention, like, hey, you've been talking about that a lot recently, or you clearly won't stop talking about X, Y, and Z. Hopefully they're saying that to you in a nicer way. I hope they're saying that to you in a nicer way. But usually it's someone else who is bringing it to our attention, because we're so caught up in our head that we don't even realize that we have been thinking about this situation or this person for days, weeks, months, years. And once you finally get out of that headspace to stop thinking about those things and you feel lighter, you're like, wow, I honestly can't even believe that I spent this amount of time thinking about somebody who was no longer in my life. Like, just think about how crazy that is. Let's say a connection ended like 5 years ago, and you spent every single week thinking about that person, thinking about what happened, thinking about that connection and how the connection dissolved. If you spent every single week for 5 years, that honestly might be longer than you even knew the person or had that connection, depending on, if y'all were friends. Let's say y'all were friends for like a year and a half, to put like a time frame on it. You're friends with somebody for a year and a half, something happened, y'all are no longer friends, but you spend every single week for 5 years thinking about them. Like, that's wild. We don't do that. Or at least we shouldn't do that. So I definitely would say, if you find yourself consistently thinking about the same thing or the same person, it is a key indicator that you are not yet over that situation. And it could be helpful to kind of jot your feelings down about it. You could write a letter and burn it. You could seek professional mental health assistance. There's lots of things that you could do, but if you are consistently thinking about it and it is taking a toll on your mental health, I would say to seek some sort of support. So with that being said, I would like to share some key ways to reflect on the past in a way that both serves you and is beneficial to you. The first way being to acknowledge that whatever happened, as much as we probably wish that it didn't happen, or that we could take it back, or that, we wish we were still friends with that person, or this or that, or whatever the case may be. Just acknowledge that it happened, because if you are in denial about what happened, then you are prolonging the healing process. So that might look like saying, yes, that person is no longer in my life, or yes, that thing did happen to me. The second key way that I would suggest for reflecting on the past in a way that best serves you is to identify any takeaways from the situation. And I know that can be difficult when it's fresh. You have this defensive wall of anger up, but as soon as you are in a place where you are able to identify alternative perspectives, which I talked about earlier, then identify any takeaways from the situation. So maybe this person's no longer in your life, but this person is no longer in your life because they were exhibiting a lot of toxic behavior, and now you no longer have that toxic behavior in your life. Like, that's a win in my book. Or maybe you got rejected from this one place and it really hurt, but ultimately it really challenged you to not give up and keep going and, you know, strive for better and want better for yourself, like, that is also a win in my book. So, you know, you can mourn, because, you know, loss and rejection, it's a form of grief. There's a process of grief that happens and occurs. You can go through the mourning of the connection or the mourning of the rejection, but after that, just think about, in what ways did this situation happening improve my life? Like, there's probably at least one way. I would just challenge you to find like one takeaway. The last way that I would like to speak about in terms of reflecting on your past is to express gratitude. And I know that that might sound a bit weird, especially if you were reflecting on something that was damaging, traumatic, or just had a very negative impact on your life. But when I say express gratitude, I'm not saying express gratitude for the thing that happened, because, you know, there might not be any gratitude to express for that situation happening. There's been tons of things that have happened in my life where I'm just like, yeah, there's literally like no gratitude that I have for that situation. But when I say express gratitude, I don't mean that particular situation. I'm talking about all the situations that were going on while that situation was going on. So for example, let's say you had a really bad breakup. The breakup itself, trash, horrible, not okay. But did you have some support during that time? Did you have support from family members, friends, colleagues? That is perhaps something positive that happened. Or if you experienced a very major rejection, maybe you were able to do something else instead. And so when I say express gratitude, I just want to help you get into the mindset that it's not all bad all the time, even when it feels that way, especially if you are dealing with mental health difficulties that make it hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So expressing gratitude is a great way to tap into the brighter side of life and all of its small joys and simple pleasures. The last thing that I would like to say is that when reflecting on your past, ultimately appreciate your progress, because there will be highs and lows in life, but through everything, with the right set of tools and a healthy mindset, you can overcome your past traumas and continue healing in a way that best benefits you. And also, know when to seek the support of a mental health professional. So that brings me to the end of another video, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it as the channel is growing. I really appreciate my subscribers' support, and if you liked what I had to say, I hope that you will consider giving this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribing if you are not already subscribed, so that you can join the virtual party. Plus, I will throw my Instagram up somewhere over here so that you can follow me over there for mental wellness shenanigans. And with that being said, make sure to drink some water and give yourself a hug. Jazz out.